Welcome, Lois.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here and excited to share I hope, some words of wisdom and just have an opportunity to connect with you this evening. I am amazed that over 70 people are on this Zoom tonight when I know the work that you've probably done today after a hard day's work to sign up to attend another Zoom conference is really remarkable. So I'm honored that you would join us tonight. I would like to share my screen and talk a little bit about resilience and how we can support ourselves and each other through such challenging times. I think this coming week marks for us here at Midcoast the 1-year anniversary of our first COVID patient. And about a month ago, our team started to have our incident command system set up. And so you know how when you have a major life event, whether it's a loss of a loved one or whatever, that first year, when you come upon that 1-year anniversary, it's a major big deal. So I think for so many of us, this week or this time of the year is really bringing back, look at all we've gone through over the last 12 months. And so tonight, to be able to share with you some of my experience through my career and some perspectives from a leadership perspective about how to support our colleagues through these times. I'm just glad to be here. So I'm going to share my screen. I do have some slides. I wish we were all together in person so that I'd be able, I'm very much a people person, so it's hard for me to just be talking to the Zoom, but I'm going to share my slides and encourage you, if you have some questions or comments, just put it in the question and answer box, and then we'll take some pauses and have some discussion, if you will, throughout the program. So I'm going to share my slide here. And let's see, here we go. So let me see here. Okay, so tonight, because this is being awarded contact hours, we're going to describe 4 strategies for enhancing individual resilience during times of extreme challenges and stress, and also list leadership strategies to lead and support a resilient team. So I would say, I don't need to tell you this, these are unbelievably challenging times. And these are 3 of my colleagues that I work with here. And if you look at their eyes, you see what has been going on this past year. And I know it's the same for all of you, regardless of our role in healthcare. This has been unlike anything we've ever experienced. And in fact, you know, many years ago, I became so interested in the 1918 flu pandemic and read several books about that time. And in fact, here in our employee health nurse's office, we have a plaque from 1920 memorializing the nurses who died in the 1918 flu pandemic at our founding hospital, the Bath Memorial Hospital. So when you think that 100 years from now, history books will be talking about what we're living through today. None of us, in my wildest dreams, I would have never imagined that we would have lived through something like this. And when we face challenges, it is so critical individually to ask about what brings us energy, support, and strength in the face of challenge and adversity. And that's what I'd like to talk with you tonight. And some of this is very personal. I'm going to share with you my personal journey and my perspective of these things. And then also share with you some best practices from the literature as well. So I want to talk to you about this picture right here. Is a picture of the St. Croix River. Way up in, it's called Down East Maine. It's on the border of Canada. And in fact, in front of your screen here on the far side of the river, that is Canada. And on this side of the screen that you're looking at is the United States. And this is a part of the river called Little Falls. And this is Class 3 rapids. And I have paddled this river 3 times over the last 20 years. And you get to this part in the river and there's this island, this little tree you see here in the middle. I don't know if you can see my cursor here. It's actually an island. And when you get up here and you're scouting, you have to make a decision. Which way do I want to go? Do I want to go on this side of the island? Or do I want to come on this side of the island? And twice, the first 2 times that I came down through this section of Class 3 rapids in my canoe with my friend in the front, I went on the left side And this last time that I went down this about 5 years ago, it looked like there was a lot of water on the side, more than usual. And it looked like it would be fun. So off we went down the side of the river, and right in here, you can't see it, but there's a tip of a rock, and my canoe hit that rock and we flipped and actually bumped all the way down rock by rock by rock until we came down here. All's well that ends well. But I tell you this story because when I got up, my friend who was in the front of the canoe, we were both just shaken up. We weren't hurt hard, although we had some bumps and bruises. When I came over to the side of the river and one of my other friends came out to help us out of the river, I was so upset, first of all, feeling responsible, like I screwed up and it's my fault. Of course, that's what we all think, it's my fault. I shouldn't have done this. And my friend looked me in the eye and she said, Lois, you are living your life. You are living your life. This is what happens when you're living your life. You have moments that are hard, and you can't go back and say how, beat yourself up over it. And it was just such an important point that I had to share this picture with you to also, talk about how we often come to a fork in a river and have to make a call in our lives about which way we're going to turn. And sometimes we choose a path that's easy, and sometimes we choose a path that's harder. And for me, where I find resilience personally is by retreating in nature. And when I have any challenging time in my life and I try to make it a practice every week, I would just share with you that for me, what fills my cup is many things, and that's what I want to share with you now. The first one is retreating in nature. And so understanding this next section here is asking yourself, what is it that makes you feel good in your life? What fills your cup? What makes you feel enriched and feel at peace? And for me, the first thing is retreating in nature and going on hikes. And this is from a hike this fall where I discovered this river I didn't realize was there, this little stream, and it was just so beautiful. The other thing for me that totally restores my spirit is wind and water, being on the ocean, in any kind of boat. It doesn't matter. My preference is a sailboat, but I'll take any opportunity to take a ride on the water that I can. Of course, family and friends and understanding. This is a picture of my daughter and my granddog, Fanny. So that when you think, whether it's in person or by Zoom, connecting up with family and friends. And so I think I would just like to ask you to pause for a minute. We're just going to take a minute, and you don't have to share because it's too big of a group. But I'd like you to just take a deep breath and ask yourself, what is it that fills your cup? What is it that renews your spirit? And reflect on that for a minute so that you're in touch with those things that I just shared with you. Mine is nature, wind and water, family and friends. So let's just take a minute and think about that for yourself so that you can recognize that and know that. So that's strategy number one, is knowing what it is that restores your spirit. The second thing is having effective boundaries. And when we think about the world of healthcare, and those of you in case management, I know that it is boundaryless, the work that you do. There are endless needs, and there are limited resources to meet those needs. And so often you bump up against the most complex and challenging patients that are in the system. That is your world, is to help complex and challenging patients navigate. And so oftentimes finding a way to take care of yourself also includes having effective boundaries. Saying yes when you want to say yes. Saying yes, but qualifying it, that when and if, so that you're able to put some expectations around saying yes. Whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, it's knowing that you have control over, even if you want to do something, that you can oftentimes have the timing and the circumstances upon which that you will do something or say yes. Another boundary is saying no. It's knowing when you are, you want to not do something and saying no or saying not now. And the reason I mentioned boundary is that so many of us, because we are caregivers and we give and give and give, and then before you know it, there is nothing left for ourselves and for the people that matter most to us. And so I would really ask you to ask yourself the question about your own boundaries and your own ability to set boundaries. Now, the reason I like this picture, which is another picture of that stream that I found on this hike this fall, which I wasn't even prepared to find. I'd never been on this hike before, and I'm walking in the woods through this trail finder. If you are ever in Maine, there's this great app called maintrailfinder.com. And so you can put in a zip code and it'll show you great hikes all around. Anyway, in this hike, this is a picture of that. And the reason I chose this picture for boundaries is that I think of boundaries as semi-permeable membranes instead of steel fortresses, that just like with a river, the boundaries of the river ebb and flow, and it flexes and changes depending on the season, depending on how much rainfall there have been, that realize that boundaries ebb and flow and change over time, and that it's important for you to check in with yourself and to make sure that you're setting those boundaries about the number of hours that you can work, the kind of friends that you have in your life. Are your friends and the people around you the kind that also bring you support, or is it, you know, it's probably because it's later at night and I'm a little tired. I just found myself, I almost said, you know, the people who are around you that bring you joy, and then there are others that are around you that are like, you need a chest tube after, you know, because it's like having a chest wound where you just feel like it's just sucking the life force out of you. If there are a lot of those people in your life, to just stop and take a breath and say, you know, how can I put some boundaries around my relationships and having the time to take care of myself and the people that really matter. And it isn't always easy, but the reason I like this slide too is that, again, it talks about semi-permeable membranes. Some folks go to the whole other extreme and say, oh, I'm going to set a boundary and it's going to be like a steel fortress. And when you have a steel fortress around yourself, then you don't have the opportunity to let others in or let yourself be with others. So, you know, avoiding these all or nothing kind of thinking. So the process of self-care is so key. And I love this quote, and it's unknown to me who wrote this, but that you have permission to rest. You have permission to rest. You're not responsible for fixing everything that is broken. And you do not have to try to make everyone happy. And that for now, take the time for you, and it's time to replenish. Having a reminder that those of us that are so used to giving to others that we need to take time for self-care, whatever that looks like, is also so important. And as I share these things with you, it's a reminder to myself. This is why we have these kinds of conversation, because it is certainly a journey. It's a process every day to just think about, what am I doing to take care of myself? I have to tell you this story that I have told my colleagues here, and I think there are some of my colleagues on the line that I get to work with. And I recently, with our spiritual care coordinator, behavioral health coordinator, we gave a talk here for all of our colleagues and care team members around resilience. And I talked at the beginning about my own personal journey, about when my daughter was born. It was a really stressful time. My mom had died the year before. And being a new mom, I just had a lot of anxiety. And my godmother, my aunt, came up from Massachusetts to Maine to visit with me and to check on me and to see how things were going with the new baby. Now, my Aunt Betty, who was a nurse, God rest her soul, she had 13 kids. So she knew about being a new mom. And one of the pieces of advice that she gave to me is, Lois, you need to reframe. She may not have used the word reframe. You need to rethink about what it means to take care of yourself. And maybe it's just a cup of tea. And that every day, find 10 minutes for yourself to have a cup of tea. You pour the tea, you sit down, you drink the tea, and you think this is the time that you're just taking care of yourself and nurturing yourself with a cup of tea. And for me, that metaphor meant so much. And it's been something that I've carried through in my life ever since then. And I just thought I would share that story with you, because sometimes we think that self-care has to be something big, like I'm going to sign up for a 5-week yoga class, or I'm going to go to the gym for an hour, or I'm going to have a sauna. But it doesn't necessarily have to be something that is so big that in itself it brings you another stress, because you're, feeling like, am I completing this or doing it or not? Balancing patience and tenacity is another important thing about resilience, is recognizing that for each of us, we have to have tenacity. It is something that keeps us going, and it keeps us motivated, that we're doers and we get things done. And at the same time, can we have some patience with ourselves and with others? So I find for myself, because I can be very tenacious, so I can get very passionate about things and about ideas and about what ought to happen and advocating and other things, and realize that when you balance that with patience and can take a deep breath and reflect to say, what are the hills to die on? What are the things to really go all out? And you cannot go all out on everything. Some things we may just have to be more patient about. And I love this image of the great blue heron, because I think they are a symbol of patience and tenacity. And I hope that brings you some reflection to think about what the concept of patience. They're so patient. They just stand there waiting for that fish. They stand there and they stand there and they stand there, and then all of a sudden they've got it. So. And then to talk about change practice, and we all know this through our work in helping patients change, whether it's quitting smoking or some other change. And I love this quote about change practice, that when we think about things we want to change, that first it's an intention. It's something that we are, that we're thinking about, and we just have this, we sometimes call that the contemplative phase or the pre-contemplative phase. Then it's a behavior. Then it's a habit, then it's a practice, then it's second nature, and then it's simply who we are. And sometimes this cycle can take, we can start right back at the beginning again. I know for me, with eating healthy, this is my challenge about intention, behavior, habit, practice, second nature, and simply who we are. I think I haven't quite made it to the last few steps, but it's something that I continually work on. So I want to take a few minutes now, and I want to take a pause and have some questions and answers in the question and answer box. And since I can't read them without not sharing my screen, I'm wondering if Maureen or Susan could help out with that, if there are any questions in the question and answer session.
There are no questions at this time, Lois. Mm-hmm. But I wish I knew some of these practices and some of the ideas that we talk about now 40 years ago when I was starting out as a nurse.
I know. It is so true. It is so true. And I think sometimes we're so hard on ourselves and each other too. And that's what I also mean here by being patient and with each other is just, being able to cut others some slack and ourselves some slack. Because when we do that and take a deep breath, it can be very helpful. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is supporting a resilient team. And I'd like to take some time. Oh, it looks like there's a question. Can you see that, Maureen? Or Susan? Looks like there's a question up in the Q&A.
Unmute. Yes. How do you get others to adopt these behaviors?
Okay.
Seeking buy-in is always a difficult thing.
It is, and I would say that I think it goes back to being patient too, and helping people where they are, so that we know, even with our patients, that there's no time set for their change. They have to want their own change to happen. And sometimes just being present with them, being exposed to things like this conference, having seminars that you can, or articles or things around that people can learn about. But I don't think that you can really make others be ready for that change. It's really more just holding a space and being supportive of it. And some of that we're going to talk about in a minute about how to support teams. So we might answer your question a little more directly there. Is there another question? I see another one in the box. Susan.
I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to unmute. We have been so ingrained to sacrifice our need for others. So it makes sense to adapt before burnout hits. So critical to embrace self-care. Thank you, Lee. I think that's a comment.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It reminds me of my colleague, Lauren, who I worked with for many, many years. We worked together in the emergency department, and then she was a leader in quality here. And she had this beautiful poster in her office. I'll never forget it. And it was, and the words said, "Give from the overflow, not from the well." And it had a picture of a well with the water flowing over. And when you think about what we have to give, we need to give from our overflow. If there is nothing there, it's like on an airplane. I know it's a cliche, but to put the oxygen on yourself first. And how do we balance that and balance our ability to care for others and care for ourselves, and to know what that even means and looks like? I think for me, the Auntie Betty story, my godmother, is that we don't always have to think of it as so huge to care for ourselves. It can be smaller steps. And I want to share with you one of my favorite things that has happened in the past few years is learning about a practice from Duke University, a research study with healthcare professionals called 3 Good Things. Hang on just a second. I'm going to go back up here. So Duke University has a Center for Resilience, and their goal is to prevent burnout in healthcare workers. And they have been conducting a research study. And if you go online and you Google 3 Good Things, Duke University, you're going to read a lot more about this. But it basically goes like this. Before you go to sleep at night, either write down or say to your partner or say to yourself 3 good things that happened that day. It could be the smallest things. I saw a hummingbird. I enjoyed the bagel that I had. I had a really nice conversation with my daughter, or I got a text, from somebody I care about. It doesn't have to be 3 massively amazing things that happen. Start small, 3 good things. It doesn't matter what it is. Every night before you go to bed. And the research shows that after 2 weeks of doing this, that people's PHQ-9 score improved, and that even longer term impacts of burnout were decreased for doing this. And it sounds so simple, but really our brains are wired to the negative. It's a human nature, and the flight or fight reaction that brings us, because we're always looking for danger. We're always looking for that. So just by giving yourself the opportunity to pause and say, what 3 good things happened today that can bring some joy or happiness to you. It could just be that you saw a cardinal, it doesn't have to be a major thing. So I ask you to think about that, about the 3 good things. And I know this is probably corny, but for me, it really reminded me from when I was a little girl. And when before I would go to bed at night, I would say my prayers. And I got out of that habit as I grew older. I don't know why it left me in my life. And I've replaced that now with the 3 good things. And it's one of the things that's really gotten me through this. Okay. So supporting a resilient team. And I'm just looking at the time here. Can you just remind me, Maureen or Susan, how much time, when we're supposed to be completely through?
Until 7:30.
Okay. In that case, I have time. I'm actually going to read you a story. Now, this is an article from the New York Times that I actually have in the resource list on these slides. And that at the end, I have this as a reference. But since we have the time and we did not have the ability because of, what do you call it, laws where you can't, copyright laws, I wanted to actually have a link that we could take literally 3 minutes, because that's all it takes to read it, and have you all read it, and then we could talk more about it. But because of copyright laws, we weren't allowed to do that. So I'm going to take just a few minutes. I'm going to read you a story. Okay. It's what my dog sleds taught me about planning for the unknown. It's written by Blair Braverman. He says, here's the thing about dog sleds. They never know how far they're going to run. As a musher, the human driver of the dog sled team, this is one of my main challenges. There are many ways in which my dogs know more than I do. They know if a storm is coming or if a moose crossed the trail days before. They know how ice shifts under their paws. They know if we're being followed and by what kind of animal. They know their own power. They're stronger than me, much stronger. And if they turn or stop when I ask them to, it's because they're choosing to listen and trust me. Running together is a gift they give me every day. But each time my dogs hit the trail, they run hard. They give it everything they've got. That's fine if we're going 10 miles or 30 miles, distances they can cover easily in a few hours. We can leave after dinner and be home by midnight, silver snow on a full moon night. But what if we're going 100 miles or 1,000? Asking a sled dog to pace themselves, to slow it down, is like asking a retriever to only fetch 1 ball out of 3. It goes against their every instinct. That's how I feel now mid-pandemic, that we humans are falling into uncertainty, stretching ourselves thin, and we have no idea how far it is to the finish line. The difference, of course, is that sled dogs want to run, and people do not want to live through a public health crisis. But there's a parallel here in the unknown distance and an unseen ending, and oddly enough, mushing has prepared me for this. I used to be a dedicated planner, he says. I knew what I do every day, weeks in advance. Having a plan made me feel confident and safe. And then I got into long distance dog sledding, and I discovered that the only thing worse than not having a plan was the stress of having one and constantly breaking it. I just have to say that again. The only thing worse than having a plan was the stress of having a plan and then constantly breaking it. Working with dogs in the wilderness means negotiating countless shifting variables: snow and wind, wild animals, open water, broken equipment, each dog's individual needs and changing mood. I learned that plans, when I made them, were nothing but a sketch. I loved that, nothing but a sketch. The only thing I needed to count on was the dogs and I would make decisions along the way. So how do you throw yourself into the unknown and, better yet, feel okay about it? How do you settle into an endurance challenge with no idea when it will end? One of the most surprising things about distance mushing is the need to front load rest. You're 4 hours into a 4-day race and the dogs are charging down the trail, leaning into their momentum, barely getting started. And then, despite their enthusiasm, it's time to stop. Make straw beds in the snow, take off your dog's booties, build a fire, heat up some meat stew for the team, but hey, you can have some of the stew too, and rest for a few hours. The dogs might not even sit down because they're so excited, they're howling and they're antsy to keep going. It doesn't matter. You rest. 4 hours later, you rest again. And you keep doing that, no matter how much your dogs want to keep going. In fact, you're diligent from the start, they'll actually need less rest at the end of the trip. When their muscles are stronger and their metabolisms have switched from burning glycogen to fat than at the beginning, It's far easier to prevent fatigue than to recover from it later. But resting early, anticipating your dog's needs, does something even more important than that. It builds trust. A sled dog learns that by the time she's hungry, her musher has already prepared a meal. By the time she's tired, she has a warm bed. If she's cold, you have a coat or blanket for her. If she's thirsty, you have water. And it's this security, this trust that lets her pour herself into the journey, give the trail everything she has without worrying what comes next. You can't make a sled dog run 100 miles. But if she knows you've got her back, then she'll run because she wants to, because she burns to, and she'll bring you along for the ride. What this means for people, for us, is that we can't just plan to take care of ourselves later. We shouldn't expect to catch up on sleep when we really crash or reach out to loved ones after we've been struck by loneliness. We should ask for support before we need it. We should support others before they ask, because you don't know how far you're going to need to act like you're going forever. Planning for forever is essentially impossible, but it can be actually freeing. It brings you back to the present. How long will this pandemic last? Right now, that's irrelevant. What matters is eating a nourishing meal, telling someone you love them, walking your dog, getting enough sleep. What matters is that to the degree you can, you make your own life sustainable every day. Sled dogs can run further in a shorter time than almost any animal, but they only think as far ahead as they can see, hear, and smell. They catch the scent of a deer and they see a curve in the trail. It's that way, it's simple. If the team meets an unexpected challenge, if they come to a steep mountain or take shelter in a storm, they're better off for their restraint because they're healthy, content, and they have what they need and they have each other. And there's no stronger way to meet the unknown. And I found that story so inspiring last fall when I read it. And what was really good is when you had the opportunity to read it yourself, I'd like to just take another few minutes because, again, how often are you at a conference and the person's just talking at you, and you don't get a minute to just think to yourself and reflect on what that means? So reflect on this story for a minute and ask yourself, what can you do more? What can you do less? And how can the support as an organization and an individual leader, what can we do to do what the musher does for their sled dog team to provide that support and that restraint? And so let's just take a minute and take a deep breath and think about it and ponder about this story and what it means to you. Anyone want to share what they're thinking in the Q&A box or ask a question? What are your thoughts?
We have a statement, my team could really use this message, which is good. Just love the story. It's a great metaphor. Makes me want to move to Alaska. Great story and very thought-provoking.
It looks like there's another one too, Sue.
Oh, there was 3. Oh, here it comes. I think I could be more diligent about sticking to my scheduled hours and help set the example for my coworkers. I used to find that really difficult to do at what I did.
And it looks like there's a 4th one too.
It was, oh gosh, another one.
Yeah.
I think of work-life balance and what organizations can do to support this with employees. I think I could be more diligent about sticking to my hours and set an example. Oh, somebody was in the chat. On rough days, I remind myself of my awesome coworkers who are nearby and would have my back if I needed them. They keep me afloat some days. We band together.
That is so great. That is so great. Is we do, I mean, part of what makes us happy coming to work is that we get to work with our coworkers.
Yes.
Oh, looks like there's another one.
All right. I'm reminded to stay present and slow down the multitasking. That's a challenge. And it's
It looks like there's a couple more.
oh, goodness. Yes. Thank you. The analogies and activities to work together can be transferred to teams and by individual racing through the day. I charge out of the box every morning, multitasking my butt off. Lately, I'm signing off earlier as I realize how much I need the downtime.
Yeah.
That is.
Do you think we got them all?
We got one more. My work is my second family. We need to take care of each other. Correct.
And there might have been some in the chat as well.
Yeah, I've been toggling back and
You've been going
forth.
back and forth, okay?
Yeah.
Well, we have time if we missed any.
Let me see. Nope, we have this one.
Good.
All right, I think we got them all.
Well, I have to tell you, with an interesting thing that I heard recently is that the new thing is to not think about work-life balance as much. And I was so relieved when I heard that, because I mean, work-life balance is not a thing for me because, you know, work is my passion. And I've always felt guilty about that. Like, oh my God, Lois, you work so much. And I've heard somebody, and then I always felt guilty, like I wasn't succeeding at the other, you know, I don't have work-life balance because, you know, the word balance kind of struck me. Well, somebody recently said, what we should be asking ourselves are you happy? Like, you know, what is bringing you joy? And that really helped me a lot. It's very freeing to see, you know, like for some folks, it can be about balance, and I respect that. For others, like for me, the whole work-life balance thing just made me think it was one more thing I wasn't doing good enough. So once I could let that go and say, am I happy? Am I doing what I want to be doing? Am I doing what I want to be doing? Is it filling my cup? That really helped me a lot, because that's really what it's all about. So it made me feel less like a failure on the balance side. And looks like there's one more comment or question, Susan. Oops, you can unmute.
One of these days. I completely agree with the statement of identifying if I am happy, but often workplace culture is not measured that way and can make it a conflict.
This is so true. It is so true. And that's what's hard right now too. And I'm going to talk about that in one more slide, because I think that is very true. In fact, I'm going to move to the next slide now, and we're going to talk about that some more. So this was just a summary of that article, which we've already talked about. So I think supporting staff resilience is what can we do as leaders and as colleagues to help staff resilience. The first thing I would say is, you know, one way is a paternalistic worldview, which is I know what's best and this is what's going to be okay, versus outreach, listening, engaging, and honoring expertise so that people feel heard about their lived experience, what it means to them to be going through this right now, to listen deeply and hear what is important. So as leaders, what can we do to be approachable and noticeable? You know, do we notice what's happening, and can we find ways to be responsive and follow up? Now, I tell you, so much of my role in the leader as a president of the health system, I find myself reading that serenity prayer to myself over and over again. You know, God grant me the serenity to, you know, accept the things that I cannot change and fix the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Because so much of what I face sometimes feels like peace in the Middle East, you know, and you all, and in case management, you have the most complex patients that there's no fixing that. You know, I think about, here's an example. I think about emergency department overcrowding and the backup of behavioral health patients in emergency departments that end up backing up the whole emergency department, so that we end up with medical patients on stretchers in the hallway. And there is not an emergency department in the country, I think, that isn't facing this because of the erosion of, it's so many things. It isn't one thing. If it was one thing, we could fix it. If it was easy, it would be solved. It's so complex. And so, but even though we can't fix the problem and make that stop, what can we do to help to ameliorate or support what we're going through? And then there are other things that are simple, right? I find so many things. I can be out making rounds and somebody will say to me, you know, like, I know this is really going to sound simple, but we have a big healthy cafe, which is wonderful. We're very focused on health and wellness here. We have healthy options and healthy choices. And I had a staff person say to me, you know, we always used to have this tradition where we had whoopie pies on Wednesday. And so somebody decided we shouldn't have whoopie pies anymore. And I didn't notice them because nobody can beat my mother's whoopie pies. And I just, you know, I do love them, but I wasn't eating them. I didn't notice they were gone. And somebody said, you know, and this, I feel ridiculous even telling you this story now, but, you know, could we have whoopie pies? I'm like, yeah, we can have whoopie pies because, you know, like, of course we can have whoopie pies, but we can also do things like other things that are not world peace, or, you know, we can do it's, and okay, whoopie pies is like maybe something really small that doesn't count, but we can do things. Once a nurse and CNA said to me, Lois, the batteries and the automatic hand washer thing that generates the water to come out, the sensor on our unit, they're always, you know, they're not fixed. And so it helped us to say to our facility staff, we're so grateful to know that, so they could put the batteries on a rotation schedule so that stopped happening. Those are pebbles in the shoe that are simple things. So hear it, fix it, say you fixed it, and remind people that you fixed it, and then evaluate if the fix was working. So anyway, that's something, being responsive, escalating as needed. This is so important, and recognize the strength in asking for help, so that asking for help is a sign of strength. And in our culture, so often we think of it as a weakness, but whether it's own personal health, whether it's through EAP programs or getting some counseling or seeking spiritual advice, that it is okay to ask for help. It's also okay in an organization to say, I've been working on this and nobody's listening, and I need to escalate it so that somebody, this can become a higher priority. That is a sign of strength and leadership to say, well, this is not working and we need help to fix it. And I know for myself, you know, as I've moved from being a nurse director to chief nurse and now the president, I feel sometimes like I am not connected enough directly with the staff to be able to hear when things need to happen more quickly. And so I really encourage you that work with your leader. If that's not working, escalate it to your senior leader is so important. Communicate strategically and often, and balance a style of care and accountability versus either or neither. And so sometimes you see, from a leadership perspective, or sometimes even in our practice, whether social worker or nurse or other healthcare professional, that we either have a style of care or a style of accountability. And what I'm asking us to have is both. And one is not okay versus the other, and neither is not okay. We need to balance both care and accountability. And sometimes I find some of the biggest challenges is helping folks manage ambiguity and manage complexity and shades of gray, because things are not always binary. It's not always either or, black or white, right or wrong, that it takes both. And so that's key too. So the next, I think I heard this phrase this year, toxic positivity. I'd never heard that phrase before. This is another caution, is that we have to be careful to not have toxic positivity, which means discounting people's lived experience. So, and making it seem like it's not okay to raise problems and that everything has to be positive, and that can be toxic in an environment. It can be toxic personally. So to replace that with optimism. Optimism is different than toxic positivity. Optimism is hopeful, but it's also balanced with reality checks and looking for solutions. I find if all we do is talk about problems, that sucks the ever-loving life right out of me. I am a solution-oriented person, and I think most healthcare providers are, is that if you find yourself in an environment where people are just talking about problems or just not willing to talk about the problems, that's not healthy, that we really need to be solution focused. And then networking and support is another really important way to gather that strength of learning from others and being open to really finding bright spots in innovation and inspiration, and collecting positive and nurturing relationships is another thing. And really evaluating relationships to say, you know, how much, you know, I'm not saying we have complex and challenging relationships at home and in our personal lives, and also sometimes at work. And so what can we do to really find a way to collect and nurture those positive relationships as well, and friendships? And this is a story of our Mighty Canoe group at the end of that whitewater trip where we dumped over the canoe. Don't look at my hair, please, in that one. But that's an example of just finding ways of taking care of ourselves is often as well in having a support group of people that you are with. And before we end, I want to talk a little bit about one more practical thing that we can do. Okay, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen here. And I'm just going to show you this next is the resources. So the first one is the article that we just read, in case you want to share it with others or read it again. And this next article is my favorite article about this topic that I've ever read, and it's a classic. It's from 2007 Harvard Business Review, called Manage Your Energy, Not Your Time. And it is really helpful to get to reframe how we're spending our time, how we're spending our energy, and what we focus on in our lives. It's a really great article, and I hope that it brings you some insights as well. So I'm going to stop screen sharing so that we can spend some more time with some questions and answers. And before we do that, I want to talk about one more tip around resilience and taking care of ourselves. And this is a tip that our director of behavioral health, Tom Kibler, who's a social worker, taught me, and he's been teaching this. We have a mindfulness-based stress reduction here at our hospital that we provide for the community, and we also provide it for all of our staff. And we've switched to doing it by Zoom. And I don't know if anybody has ever been through that, the John Kabat-Zinn mindfulness-based stress reduction program, but it is a really wonderful program, and I highly recommend it. But one of the bases for mindfulness-based stress reduction is a very simple exercise that you don't have to go through the 6-week training program for, is to learn about 4-square breathing. And this is done in the military. It's done by Navy SEALs. It's done by military people in combat. It's taught to people who are in high stress situations like athletes. And it is called 4-square breathing, or where you take a deep breath in to the count of 3. You hold the breath for 3 counts. You let it out to the count of 3. And then you hold it out for 3 counts. And then you do that again 2 more times. So 3 deep breaths that you're actually counting at the same time. For anyone who has a yoga practice, you also have learned these breathing techniques. And what it does is it actually, as we know, it has a physiological effect to help us with stress management. So when I find myself in these stressful situations, that is what I have been really working on doing over the past several years. I have to tell you this funny story that the year before last, because of course there was no Thanksgiving this year, my daughter was home from New York. And so, we're getting ready for the big Thanksgiving dinner. People are coming and going. Everything. She goes, Mom, you're breathing kind of funny, because I was like doing the stress breathing. So anyway, and she kind of called me out on it. But when I told her what I was doing, she said, oh, I'll try that too. So I think just recognizing that we have control of we have control of our lives. For the most part, many of us who are on the Zoom call today have the privilege of being in control of so much in our lives that many of our other people on our planet may not have. And I constantly try to remind myself that when I find myself in that situation where stress is getting the better of me, I remind myself that I'm in the driver's seat of my life, and I'm in the driver's seat of what I think about and what I give energy to and how I want to approach my day. And so I think with that, I would like to spend a little more time on questions and answers. So we've got some in the chat here. Susan, if you'd like to read them.
I am not seeing any.
I see them in the chat. It says 3.
Oh, all right. Check.
Oh, I think those are ones we'd already done before.
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't unchat them or
So does anybody else have any other comments that you'd like to make or questions that you'd like to answer today? Well, I would like to end by just saying that I'm in awe of what you do. And I'm grateful that you took the time this evening, again, after a long day of work, most likely. And I know what you do at work with all of your hard jobs and coordinating care and taking care of others, to spend some time together talking about this. I am not an expert. I am somebody who has been also on a lifelong journey of leadership to try to make things better for myself, for the people I work with, for the community I serve. And I hope that we had a chance tonight to share some of that, and that that you take some time for yourself and find whatever your metaphor cup of tea is in your life to give yourself some peace and joy every day. So thank you so much.